A few years ago I found that a minute-long recording exists of Johannes Brahms playing the piano. Recorded in December 1889 on a Thomas Edison wax cylinder, it sounds something like this. As you can hear, it hasn't aged well. Years of being played on the wrong equipment took its toll. By the time it was digitised, it was barely audible. So I did some digging to see if there's any way of turning this mess into something that can be performed. The recording is of this 60-bar extract of Brahms's Hungarian Dance No. 1, starting at bar 13 due to the cylinder's limited recording time. In 1994, two researchers, Jonathan Berger and Charles Nichols, produced a denoised version of the recording using state-of-the-art techniques. Their cleaned-up version sounds like this. However, it turned out that under all the noise there were some very strange things going on with this recording. Their conclusions were, the rhythms played in the first section do not match the score. Significant sections appear improvised. Brahms paused on some chords for much longer than we would have expected. And at some moments, Brahms dramatically changed speed. Points 3 and 4 can be confirmed by careful listening and are only minor changes to the original score. However, points 1 and 2 suggest major changes to the score and make reconstruction very difficult, so these are the ones we need to look at in detail. Let's start with underdotting. The rhythm as written in the score sounds like this. Underdotting is where you even out the note lengths, making the short note longer and the long note shorter, making it sound like this. The only problem with this is it sounds like shit. So there's no reason why Brahms would have done this when he could just play what he wrote, which sounds better. There's no good evidence that underdotting was an expressive device that people used in the 19th century. As for whether Brahms improvised, in their paper, Berger and Nichols make the case that where the original score says to play this, Brahms replaced it with an improvisation which they've partially transcribed, which looks like this and sounds like this. I have a lot of problems with this transcription, not only because it sounds disappointing and doesn't fit in musically, but also because the whole idea of Brahms improvising doesn't make sense. Why would Brahms freely improvise for the first recording device ever invented in the first and only recording session he ever did? Why would no eyewitnesses to the event mention that he improvised? And isn't it a bit of a coincidence that the whole of this improvisation happened on a particularly damaged and inaudible section of the cylinder? So I set out to see if there are better solutions to these problems. There's now a large body of evidence that people played the piano very differently 130 years ago, and the mind-meltingly good book Off the Record by Neil Perez da Costa spells out in detail all the crazy nonsense piano players used to do that you'd never get away with doing today. Two features in particular are useful to us in decoding the Brahms cylinder. Dislocation, the act of playing one hand separately from the other. Tempo modification, the act of modifying tempo. So it turns out that back in the old days, pianists were crazy about playing their hands out of time for expressive effect. Just listen to these examples. Tempo modification is still around in piano playing today, but back then they did crazy tempo modification. I'll let Vladimir de Pachmann demonstrate. So how can we apply these techniques to the Brahms recording? Remember underdotting? It looked like this and sounded like shit. We can't hear the bass in the recording, so it's possible that the first melody note doesn't come in at the start of the bar. We also can't tell how long notes are held for, so the second note could still be short. So we can rewrite our notation as this, which doesn't look so different from our original dotted rhythm, only the first quaver is missing. We just assume that there's an unheard bass note filling the gap at the start of the bar. That would sound like this. So we can reinterpret what we heard on the recording not as underdotting, which sounds like shit and no one used, but as dislocation, which everyone used and I think sounds pretty good. I even think it doesn't sound too far away from what's written in the score. Now on to improvisation. There's a big problem with Berger and Nichols' transcription from earlier. We can't hear the bass on the recording, and the bass has a huge influence over where the bar is heard to start, so we shouldn't make any assumptions about where the bar lines go. If we remove the bar lines and try to match the notes to the original score, then hold on. These are the same! We've found the same notes and rhythms that are in the original score. Suddenly this section doesn't seem so improvised. However, we have some discrepancies in the rhythm which we should investigate further. As Berger and Nichols only gave timings for half of this section, I've gone ahead and worked out the rest. I then made transcriptions for each phrase, which I'll now play, followed by the relevant section of the original recording. So now we need to explain why these rhythms don't match the rhythms for the melody in the original score. Problems in the first phrase are that this C seems to come really early and this dotted rhythm is evened out. My idea is, what if Brahms suddenly played this bar at a much faster speed, then went back to the old speed and dislocated this melody note? That would sound like this. It matches both the recording and the score, and I think it sounds pretty good. Let's move on to the next phrase. Speed up this bar, dislocate here, speed up this bar, and dislocate here. Next, speed up this bar, dislocate here, speed up this bar, and dislocate here. And for the last one, make this note really short. So that's it. We've explained the timings for this section without improvisation, and I think it sounds pretty decent. So now it's time to put it all together and see what it sounds like. In conclusion, it seems Brahms did respect his score. He used rhythmic improvisation techniques which have gone extinct in classical music over the last century, and if we could bring them back, I think it would shed a whole new light on his music. I want to thank Jonathan Berger and Charles Nichols for their excellent work denoising the cylinder, and Neil Perez da Costa for his incredible book on past performing practices. If you enjoyed this video, let me know and I'll try my best to make more. Bye bye!